Snow fell thick and heavy outside the cabin windows. Daniel Reed sat by the fireplace, watching flames dance across dry wood. 3 years had passed since the accident, 3 years since he watched his crew die while their freight ship tore itself apart in the void. 3 years of living alone on this forgotten forest moon where nobody asked questions and nobody expected answers. His hands still shook sometimes when he remembered the alarms, the screaming, the way the hole buckled and twisted. He had saved himself last, making sure everyone else got to the escape pods first, but they pods malfunctioned one by one. They failed. He survived because he stayed at his post too long, because by the time he ran for safety, the only pod left was the one that actually worked. That survivor's guilt, the counselors called it. Daniel called it justice. He deserved to remember. He deserved the nightmares. The scratching at his door started just after dawn. At first, Daniel thought it was wind pushing branches against the wood. Then he heard something else, a sound like whimpering, like something small and scared and desperate. He opened the door and cold air rushed inside. At his feet, barely visible against the white snow, lay a tiny creature. Silver scales caught the pale morning light, wings no bigger than his hand trembled against a body the size of house gat. Violet eyes looked up at him with startling intelligence. Daniel had seen many strange things during his years hauling freight across the galaxy. Aliens of every shape and philosophy, creatures that defied explanation, but he had never seen dragon. Nobody had. Dragons were myths, stories told to children. The creature at his feet was dying. He could see that clearly. Its breath came in short gasps. Ice crystals clung to its scales. It had been out in the storm for hours, maybe longer. Daniel knelt down. The dragon flinched but didn't run. Those violet eyes held his gaze with an expression he recognized. Please help me. I'm so tired. That he scooped the creature up carefully. It weighed almost nothing. Its scales felt like ice against palms. He brought it inside and kicked the door shut against the wind. The dragon lay limp in his arms as he carried it to the fireplace. He grabbed blankets from his bed and wrapped the small body carefully, leaving just the head exposed. Then he set it down on the rug near the fire and waited. Minutes passed. The dragon's breathing steadied. Its eyes closed. For a moment Daniel thought it had died. Then it stirred, scales rustling against fabric that he needed to feed it something. But what did dragons eat? He pulled meat from his cold storage and cut it into small pieces. The dragon sniffed at the offering but turned away. Frustration built in Daniel's chest. The creature was starving. He could see its ribs pressing against its sides. Why wouldn't it eat? He tried different foods, dried fruit, processed protein bars, even some of the local berries he had harvested last month. The dragon refused. Everything with the same gentle but firm disinterest. Daniel was cutting more meat when a knife slipped. The blade caught his palm and blood welled up red and bright. He cursed and reached for a cloth. The dragon's head snapped up, its eyes fixed on Daniel's hand with sudden intensity. But the creature wasn't looking at the blood. It was looking at Daniel's face, at the concern there, at the frustration and worry written clear across his features. The dragon stood on shaky legs and walked over to the plate of meat. It ate slowly, watching Daniel. The entire time, those violet eyes never left his face. Understanding dawned Slowly, the dragon hadn't needed to see that Daniel could provide food. It had needed to see that Daniel cared whether it lived or died. When the dragon finished eating, it walked across the rug and pressed itself against Daniel's leg. The creature weighed so little he barely felt it, but warmth spread through his chest anyway, something he hadn't felt in 3 years, something like purpose. The dragon made a sound like purring mixed with chirping. Its eyes drifted closed again. This time Daniel knew it was sleep, not death. He sat there for a long time, not moving, afraid to disturb the small creature that had chosen his doorstep out of all the places in the universe. Later, after the dragon had been sleeping for an hour, Daniel finally stood up carefully. He needed answers. He activated his communication terminal and called the local ranger station. Allison Brooks answered on a third ping. Her face appeared on the screen, friendly and professional. Daniel, been a while. What's going on? I found something outside my cabin. An animal, looks like a small dragon. Allison's eyebrows rose. A dragon? You feeling okay out there? The isolation getting to you? I'm serious. Silver scales, wings, the whole thing. Her expression shifted from amused to concerned. There are no dragons on this moon. No dragons anywhere in this sector. You sure you didn't just find an injured bird or something? Daniel glanced back at the sleeping creature by his fireplace. Wings folded against its back, tail curled around its body. Definitely not a bird, it's a dragon, he said firmly. Allison tapped something on her end. Could be an escaped exotic pet. Some collectors like weird animals. I can send wildlife control to pick it up. The dragon stirred in its sleep. One violet eye opened and fixed on Daniel. Something passed between them in that moment, a feeling, a knowing. This creature hadn't escaped from anywhere. It had come here deliberately. No. Daniel said, I'll handle it. You sure? Exotic animals can be dangerous. I'm sure. Allison looked skeptical, but she nodded. All right, but if it causes problems, call me. We'll deal with it. Daniel ended the call and walked back to the fireplace. The dragon was awake now, watching him with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Around its neck, faint symbols glowed beneath the scales, markings that looked almost like writing. Where did you come from? Daniel whispered. The dragon tilted its head. Then it did something Daniel would have sworn was impossible. It smiled. Just a slight upturn at the corners of its mouth, a gesture that said clearly, I came from wherever I needed to be to find you. Outside, the storm continued. Inside the cabin, something new had begun. Daniel didn't understand it yet, but he felt it in his bones. His life of isolation and guilt and hiding was over. The dragon had made sure of that. 7 days passed and the dragon refused to leave. Daniel sighed. It followed him everywhere. When he cooked, the dragon sat on the counter watching. When he worked on repairing his old equipment, the dragon curled up on his workbench. When he slept, the dragon nested against his chest. Daniel started calling it Ash. The name came naturally one morning, while watching sunlight turn the creature's silver scales into something that looked like fine ash floating in the air. The dragon seemed to approve, making that purring, chirping sound whenever Daniel used a name. But strange things kept happening, things Daniel couldn't explain. The nightmares came every night, always the same. His crew screaming, metal tearing the void, rushing in. Daniel would wake up gasping, heart pounding, sweat soaking. His sheets, except now when he woke, Ash would be there. The dragon would press its small head against Daniel's forehead, and suddenly images would flood his mind, peaceful images of forest in summer, water flowing over smooth stones, stars wheeling overhead in patterns that felt ancient and safe. The terror would fade, his breathing would steady, he would sleep again. Without dreams, the dragon was doing something to him, helping him somehow. But how did Ash know what he needed? Then there was the incident with a water filtration system. Daniel spent 2 hours to try to figure out why it had stopped working. The system was complex, with dozens of components buried in the cabin's foundation. He would need to tear up half the floor to trace the problem. Ash watched him work for a few minutes, then the dragon walked across the room and scratched at a specific floor panel. When Daniel ignored it, Ash scratched harder. Finally, Daniel gave in and pulled up the panel. The damaged component sat right there, a crack valve that had been slowly leaking for weeks. Ash couldn't have known where it was. The dragon had never been in that part of the cabin, yet somehow Ash had known exactly where to look. Daniel started researching. The cabin's computer had access to the galactic database, though information loaded slowly. This far from civilization, he searched for dragons, for legends, for anything that might explain what Ash really was. Most results were useless: fantasy stories, children's tales, archaeological records of bones that might have belonged to large flying reptiles millions of years ago. Nothing that matched what slept on his bed every night. Then he found a single reference buried in an old ethnographic study: a species called Draci, beings of consciousness that occasionally took physical form. According to the text, Draci chose mortal companions and bonded with them across multiple lifetimes. The bond allowed them to share thoughts, emotions, even memories. Most scientists dismissed Draci as mythology, but the description matched too perfectly to ignore. Daniel was still reading when someone knocked on his door. Ash's head snapped up immediately. The dragon's scales bristled and a low growl rumbled from its throat. Daniel opened the door to find a Varillian standing on his porch. The alien's gray skin looked almost purple in the afternoon light. He wore expensive clothing and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Daniel Reed, the Varillian asked. That's me. My name is Gry. I'm tracking a stolen item. A very valuable item. I believe you have it. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to the door frame blocking the entrance. I don't have anything that belongs to you. Gry smiled, but there was no warmth in it. A Draci egg was stolen from a collector 3 weeks ago. The egg hatched somewhere in this region. My scans led me here. I don't know what you're talking about. The dragon, the small silver one. I know it's here. I can feel it. Griggs took a step forward. The collector paid enormous sums for that egg. I'm authorized to offer you a finder's fee, 10,000 credits. Just hand over the hatchling and walk away. Ash appeared at Daniel's feet. The dragon positioned itself between the two men, violet eyes fixed on Grix with unmistakable hostility. Something about Grix's story felt wrong. Daniel had hauled freight long enough to recognize a lie when he heard one. The details were too smooth, too practiced. The dragon stays with me. Daniel said that. Grix's expression hardened. Don't be Stupid, that creature is worth more than you can imagine. If you won't take the reward, I'll simply report you to the authorities. Theft of exotic animals carries serious penalties. Then report me. The villain's hand moved towards something at his belt, a weapon. Daniel tensed, ready to slam the door, but Ash was faster. The dragon released a sound Daniel felt in his bones. Not quite a roar, not quite a scream, something between them that carried layers of meaning he somehow understood. Wrong. Liar, danger. Grix stumbled backward, clutching his head, his face twisted in pain. Whatever Ash had done affected him deeply. The Varillian retreated to his ship without another word, but before climbing inside he turned back. This isn't over. I'll return with proper authorization. The hollow circle doesn't give up easily. The ship lifted off in a cloud of dust and disappeared into the sky. Daniel knelt beside Ash. What was that? What did you do to him? The dragon didn't answer with sound. Instead, Ash pressed its forehead against Daniel's hand, and suddenly Daniel's world exploded with images that he saw himself, but not himself. Different bodies, different times, always the same person inside, always with a silver dragon at his side, violet eyes watching him across centuries, across lifetimes that he saw, moments he had forgotten. A silver shape moving through stars the night before his crew died, a dream of violet eyes the week before he chose this moon for his exile, signs he had dismissed as imagination or coincidence. The vision faded and Daniel found himself gasping. Ash watched him with patient understanding. You've been looking for me, Daniel whispered. Not just now, for years, maybe longer. Ash made that purring, chirping sound. Dragon's tail curled around Daniel's wrist gently. Why me? What makes me special? The dragon showed him one more image. Daniel standing on his dying ship, refusing to leave until every crew member was in an escape pod, standing there even though he knew he might die, choosing others over himself without hesitation. That moment, that choice, that was what made him worthy of a Drakai's bond. Daniel sat on his cabin floor with a dragon curled in his lap and realized his entire understanding of reality had just changed. Ash hadn't found him by accident. The universe was bigger and stranger than he had ever imagined, and somewhere out there, people called the Hollow Circle wanted to take Ash away from him. That wasn't going to happen. Daniel had failed his crew. He wouldn't fail his dragon. 3 days after Gry left, ships began arriving. Daniel counted 5 at first, then 7, then too many to track as they spread across the forest, moon like a net closing around prey. He watched from his window as armed teams deployed into the wilderness. Professional hunters with expensive gear, thermal scanners, motion detectors, tracking drones that buzzed through the trees like mechanical insects. They were searching for something specific for Ash. The communication terminal beeped. Allison Brooks appeared on screen and her face showed real worry. Daniel, we need to talk now. I am listening. Those ships, the people searching your area, they work for something called the Hollow Circle. You know what that is? Daniel shook his head. Crime syndicate. Big one. They've been operating in the outer sectors for decades. Allison pulled up files on her end. Apparently, they're hunting Drakai, living ones. Something about harvesting their essence to make drugs. Daniel felt cold spread through his chest. Drug enhancement. Drugs. The most potent in the galaxy. One dragon could be worth billions of credits on the black market. She looked directly at the camera. They have legal warrants. Daniel, claiming your dragon is stolen property. I've been ordered to give you 24 hours to surrender it voluntarily. After that they'll come take it by force. The warrants are fake. The dragon isn't stolen. Maybe. Probably, but the law says I have to enforce them anyway. Allison's voice dropped. I am sorry. I wish I could do more. If you resist, they'll arrest you. Best case, you spend years fighting this in court. Worst case, they kill you and claim self-defense. Daniel looked at Ash. The dragon had grown noticeably over the past 2 weeks. Now the size of a large dog, with scales that seemed harder and wings that could actually spread wide. But Ash was still young, still vulnerable, still dependent on their bond to survive in physical form. 24 hours, Daniel said quietly. Got it. He ended the call and started moving. His freight pilot training had included survival and evasion tactics. More importantly, when he first arrived at this cabin 3 years ago, his paranoia had driven him to install escape routes, hidden compartments, emergency supplies. He had prepared for threats that never came until now. Daniel packed quickly. Food, water, medical supplies, tools. He couldn't take much. They would need to move fast and light. Ash watched him work with those intelligent violet eyes, understanding without words what was happening. Night fell and Daniel triggered the hidden panel in his bedroom floor. The passage beneath led to a tunnel he had dug by hand over months of isolation. It emerged a mile from the cabin in a section of dense forest where scanner interference for mineral deposits made tracking difficult. Time to go, he whispered. Ash followed without hesitation. They moved through darkness, Daniel using a small light to navigate while Ash walked beside him. The dragon's scales gave off a faint glow that helped illuminate the path. An hour of walking brought them to the tunnel exit. Above ground, the forest stretched in every direction. Daniel oriented himself by the stars and headed toward the volcanic region. The hunters would follow eventually, but the thermal vents and magnetic fields there would make scanning nearly impossible. It was their best chance. They traveled through the night. Daniel's muscles ached, his lungs burned from the cold air, but Ash never complained, never slowed. The dragon kept pace with steady determination. As they walked, images filtered through their bond. Ash was sharing information without words. Daniel learned fragments of truth about what Drakai really were. Not animals, not simple creatures, ancient beings of pure consciousness that existed in a dimension parallel to normal space. They took physical form only when they found their chosen bond mate, the human they had been searching for across vast stretches of time. Each Drakai chose their bonded human before the human was even born. They waited decades, sometimes centuries, for the right moment to manifest, watching, guiding, protecting from a distance. Ash had chosen Daniel long before the accident, before his career as a freight pilot, before he was even old enough to understand what the silver shapes in his dreams meant. The dragon had waited patiently for him to reach the point where he was ready, where he could accept the truth. The volcanic region appeared as the sun rose, jagged cliffs surrounded by steam vents that hissed and bubbled. Daniel found a narrow canyon and led Ash deeper into the maze of rock and heat. Behind them in the distance he heard engines. The hunters had found their trail. They took shelter in a lava tube that cut deep into the mountainside. Daniel collapsed against the wall, exhausted. Ash lay beside him, sides heaving with effort. "We can't run forever," Daniel said. Ash's response came as feeling rather than words. Not running, preparing, growing. The dragon needed time to develop, time to become strong enough to defend itself properly. Right now, Ash was still vulnerable, still dependent, but that would change. The sound of vehicles grew louder. Outside, Daniel peered through the tunnel entrance and saw 3 hunting teams converging on their position. They moved with military precision. Professional, dangerous point. One of them carried a device that hummed with power, some kind of scanner or weapon. The woman holding it looked directly at the lava tube entrance and smiled. She had found them. Daniel recognized her from one of postings he had seen during his freight pilot days. A hunter with a reputation for never losing her prey. She had tracked criminals across entire sectors, captured things that others said were impossible to catch. Now she had Daniel and Ash cornered in a cave with nowhere left to run. Raised her weapon and her team spread out to cover every angle. Her voice carried clearly across the rocks. "Daniel Reed, you're under arrest for theft of exotic property. Surrender the Draki, and you'll be processed fairly. Resist, and we'll take it from your corpse." Daniel looked at Ash. The dragon's violet eyes met his with absolute trust. Ash believed in him, believed he would find a way through this point. 3 years ago, Daniel had watched his crew die while he survived. He had lived with that guilt every day since. He had hidden on this moon, avoiding responsibility, avoiding connection, avoiding life itself. That version of Daniel was gone. The dragon had made sure of that. He stood up and walked toward the cave entrance with Ash at his side. The lava tube stretched deeper into the mountain than Daniel had first realized. He and Ash retreated into darkness while and her team prepared to advance. They had time, minutes, maybe enough to think, except Ash wasn't retreating anymore. The dragon had stopped in the center of a wider chamber. Its body began to glow, soft at first, then brighter. Scales that had been silver turned luminous white. The air around Ash shimmered with heat that had nothing to do with the volcanic rock. Daniel reached for the dragon, but Ash pushed him back gently with one wing. The transformation had begun, and it couldn't be stopped. Light filled the chamber as Ash grew. Bones lengthened, wings spread wider, muscle built on muscle. Within minutes, the dragon went from the size of a large dog to something the size of a horse. The scales hardened into armor plating, claws extended sharp and deadly. This was what a Draki looked like when fully manifested. This was the creature that had been waiting inside the small hatchling Daniel found in the snow. But the transformation took its toll. Ash collapsed when it finished, sides heaving with exhaustion. The glow faded. The dragon's eyes struggled to stay open. Through their bond, Daniel felt everything, the immense effort required to force physical form to grow so quickly, the drain on energy reserves. Ash had done this too soon before fully ready, because they were out of options. And time, footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. The hunters were coming. Daniel knelt beside Ash and placed his hand on the dragon's neck. "Rest, I'll handle this." Ash's eyes opened slightly. The The dragon tried to stand but couldn't, too weak, too drained the transformation had taken. Everything, the hunters entered the chamber with weapons raised, re-led them. Her scanner device pointed directly at Ash. She saw the transformation and her eyes widened. Slightly, professional surprise, not fear. This just made the dragon more valuable, impressive, Ree said. Buyer will pay extra for a mature specimen. Reed, step away from it. Daniel stood between Ree and Ash. No. Don't be stupid, we have authorization. Legal warrants, you can't win this. Warrants are fake and you know it, Ree. Shrugged, doesn't matter, we're taking the dragon either way. She gestured to her team. Stun him carefully, I don't want him damaged before anyone could move. Daniel activated his communication device. He had set it to broadcast on all frequencies, emergency channels, news networks, public bands, everything. My name is Daniel Reed. I'm broadcasting from a volcanic canyon on the forest moon in the outer rim. The people surrounding me work for the Hollow Circle. They're trying to take a living conscious being called a Drakai. They're going to trap it, torture it, harvest its essence to make drugs. Reese's expression darkened. Shut that off now. Daniel kept talking. Drakai are ancient beings. They bond with humans across lifetimes. They're not animals. They're not property. The Hollow Circle has been hunting them for generations, trapping them between dimensions, making them suffer in ways you can't imagine, all for profit. Two of Reese's team moved toward him, but she held up a hand. She was calculating. Killing someone during a live broadcast would cause problems. She needed to handle this carefully. Daniel continued broadcasting. The dragon with me is named Ash. Ash chose me before I was born, waited decades to find me. We're bonded now, connected in ways that matter more than any law or warrant. If you think that's theft, if you think that crime, then you don't understand what it means to be human. His words reached beyond the immediate area. Ships in orbit picked up the signal. Independent journalists monitoring emergency frequencies heard every word. More importantly, other humans scattered across the sector were listening. People who still believed in something beyond profit and power. Ree lowered her weapon slightly. You think speech changes anything? The Hollow Circle owns half the officials in this sector. Your broadcast won't stop us. Maybe not today, Daniel said, but people are listening now. They know what you are, what you do that matters. A new voice cut through the channel. Allison Brooks. This is Ranger Brooks on official business. All Hollow Circle personnel are ordered to stand down immediately. I've contacted sector authorities and they're launching formal investigation into your warrants and operations. Reese laughed. You're one ranger on a backwater moon. You have no authority here. No, but they do. 3 ships dropped from orbit, not Hollow Circle vessels. These were clean official, marked with sector enforcement insignia. They landed around the canyon with practiced precision. But Allison's voice continued. New evidence suggests your warrants were issued fraudulently. You're all being detained, pending investigation. Drop your weapons. Ree looked at Daniel with pure hatred. This isn't over. The Hollow Circle doesn't give up. We have too much invested. Too many dragons already in processing. You saved one. We have hundreds. Her team reluctantly lowered their weapons as sector enforcement moved in. Raze allowed herself to be cuffed, but her Eyes never left Daniel. We'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but we'll be back. The hunters were led away, and suddenly Daniel and Ash were alone in the chamber. Well, not completely alone. Allison appeared at the tunnel entrance, breathing hard from running. That was either very brave or very stupid, she said. Probably both. She looked at Ash. The dragon had managed to lift its head, but still couldn't stand. Is it true, everything you said about bonding and consciousness? Every word. Allison was quiet for a moment, then she smiled slightly. Good, because we have company incoming, and you're going to need to explain all of this again. Daniel felt movement in the air, a change in pressure. He looked up and saw shapes descending from the sky. Dragons, 3 of them fully grown, magnificent. Their scales caught the sunlight in colors that seemed impossible. Emerald, ruby, sapphire. They landed around the canyon with careful grace. The largest and emerald-scale dragon approached slowly. Its eyes were the same violet as Ash's. Ancient, knowing, it looked at the younger dragon with obvious relief. Through Ash, Daniel felt communication happening, not words, pure meaning flowing between minds. The adult dragons have been searching for lost hatchlings, following traces of dimensional disturbance. They found Ash because Daniel's broadcast drew their attention. The emerald dragon turned its gaze to Daniel. He felt himself being examined, judged, measured, not with hostility, but with careful assessment. Then the dragon did something unexpected. It bowed its head slightly, a gesture of respect, recognition. This human had protected one of their young, had risked everything to keep Ash safe. That mattered. Allison made a small sound of amazement. I think we're going to need back up. Daniel sat down beside Ash and realized his life had just changed. Again, the hollow circle was exposed, but not defeated. There were hundreds of trapped dragons suffering in dimension cages, and now he knew that truth. Now he understood what was really happening, that he couldn't walk away from that, wouldn't walk away from that. Ash raised its head and touched Daniel's hand with its nose. The dragon's exhaustion was fading, strength returning through their bond. Daniel felt determination, purpose. They had work to do. Dragons to free, a syndicate to destroy. The emerald dragon made a sound like distant thunder, not threatening, questioning. With his human help, would he stand with the dry against those who hunted them? Daniel looked at the ancient creature and gave the only answer that made sense. Yes, the emerald dragon's name was KTH. Daniel learned this not through words, but through pure meaning that flowed directly into his mind through Ash. The other 2 dragons were Silra and Orthane. Together they represented what remained of the free Drakai elders, 3 survivors from a species that once numbered in the thousands. They gathered in a clearing near the volcanic canyon. Daniel sat with Ash while the elder dragons shared information. What he learned made him physically ill. The hollow circle had been hunting Drak for over a century. They used dimensional anchors, devices that trapped dragons between physical reality and their home realm, unable to fully manifest or retreat to safety. The trapped Drakai existed in perpetual agony. Their consciousness was slowly harvested, refined, processed into enhancement drugs that granted humans temporary expanded perception and reflexes. Thousands of Drakai had been caught this way. Thousands more had simply stopped trying to manifest, choosing to remain in their home dimension rather than risk capture. The species was dying not from natural causes but from systematic extermination by creatures who saw them only as resources. Sela, the ruby scale dragon, showed Daniel an image through ash, a facility on an industrial moon. Rows of dimensional anchors, each containing a Drakai trapped mid-manifestation. Their screams existed at frequencies beyond normal hearing, but Daniel felt them anyway through the bond, pain that transcended physical sensation. How many? Daniel asked quietly. Darth's response came as number and feeling. Combined, 47 in that facility alone, 6 other facilities scattered across the outer sectors, 212 Drakai trapped in suffering. We have to free them. Ash stirred beside Daniel. The dragon had recovered strength but still needed rest. The premature transformation had pushed physical limits, but through their bond, Daniel felt Ash's agreement. They had to act. Orthing, the sapphire scale dragon, projected concern. The facilities were heavily defended. Arm guards, automated weapons, dimensional shields that prevented Drakai from approaching. 3 elder dragons and 1 bonded pair couldn't assault them directly, but Daniel had spent years hauling freight across the galaxy. He knew how facilities like that operated. Security focused outward, watching for threats from space or air. Ground approaches were often neglected, and he had skills beyond combat. He understood logistic, supply chains, weaknesses, and systems. We don't assault, Daniel said. We infiltrate. Over the next week, plans took shape. Daniel contacted old freight pilot associates, people who owed him favors or who still operated in moral gray areas. He gathered intelligence on the Hollow Circle facilities, guard rotations, supply schedules, structural weaknesses. Continued growing. The dragon's bond with Daniel deepened until they could share thoughts almost seamlessly. Daniel found himself perceiving things no human should notice. Dimensional currents, the shimmer of consciousness moving through space. His awareness expanded in ways that felt both foreign and natural. Kith explained this was normal for bonded pairs. The connection worked both ways. Ash gained full physical manifestation through Daniel. Daniel gained access to perception beyond normal human limits. They were becoming something more than either species could achieve alone. The first operation targeted the facility Silra had shown him, smaller than they others. Only 47 trapped Drakai, but 47 lives that mattered. Daniel infiltrated as a supply contractor. Fake credentials weren't hard to obtain when you knew the right people. He wore a simple maintenance uniform and carried tools that looked ordinary but had been modified by Allison's engineer friends. Dimensional disruptors, anchor breakers, devices that could free trapped dragons without triggering alarms. The facility smelled like chemical cleaning agents and ozone. Hollow Circle guards walked patrol routes with bored efficiency. They expected threats from outside, not from a lone maintenance worker. Daniel found the holding chambers deep underground. The dimensional anchors hummed with power. Inside each one, a Drakai hung suspended. Some had been there for decades, their physical forms frozen mid-transformation. Eyes that should have shown intelligence were glazed with pain. His hands shook as he attached the first disruptor. This device had to work. If it failed, alarms would trigger and he would die here. More importantly, the dragons would Continue suffering, the disruptor. Activated, the anchor's power. Fluctuated then failed, the Draka. Inside vanished as it retreated to its home dimension, finally free after years of torment. Daniel moved to the next anchor, then the next. One by one he freed trapped dragons. Some were too weak to retreat fully. Those he carried to a designated extraction point where Ash and the elders waited beyond the facility's dimensional shields. He had freed 32 when someone noticed. Alarm screamed through the facility. Guards converged on his position. Daniel ran, still carrying a dragon too weak to move on its own. Weapons fire scorched the walls behind him. He made it to the extraction point as Ash crashed through the facility's outer wall. The dragon was massive now, fully grown, powerful. Ash's arrival shattered defensive systems and gave Daniel the opening he needed to escape. They fled into the sky, with guards firing after them. Daniel held tight to Ash's scales as the dragon climbed higher. Behind them, more Draka emerged from the facility, free by the chaos Daniel had created. Not all 47. Only 34 made it out. The others were too weak or too far gone. But 34 dragons that have been trapped for decades were now free. 34 lives saved. Daniel felt their gratitude through the bond, not words, emotion, relief, joy, desperate thankfulness for release from endless suffering. Ash shared his exhaustion, his triumph, his sorrow for the ones they couldn't save. Through their connection, Daniel understood something profound. This was just the beginning. One facility down, 6 more to go. Nearly 200 dragons still trapped and suffering. The hollow circle would respond with force. They would hunt Daniel and Ash. They would increase security. They would fight desperately to protect their profitable operation. But something had changed in Daniel. The guilt he carried about his crew hadn't disappeared. It never would, but had transformed into purpose. He couldn't save his crew, but he could save others. He could fight for creatures who couldn't fight for themselves. They landed on a remote asteroid where the elder dragons waited. Kurth examined the free Draka, helping the weakest recover. Silra and Orthane stood guard, watching for pursuit. Ash curled around Daniel protectively. The dragon was exhausted but alert, ready for whatever came next. Daniel checked his equipment and began planning the next operation. 6 facilities remaining, nearly 200 dragons still trapped. The work continued. Somewhere in the distance, hollow circle ships were already mobilizing. Ree was probably among them, still hunting, still determined to recapture what they had freed. Daniel smiled grimly. Let them come. He wasn't a frightened freight pilot who survived while his crew died anymore. He wasn't the guilty hermit hiding on a forest moon. He was something new, something the hollow circle hadn't expected. That he was a bonded human, and bonded humans didn't run, they fought. 6 months passed, 6 facilities raided, 183 dragons freed. Daniel's face appeared on wanted postings across the outer sectors. The hollow circle put bounties on his head that would make most people wealthy for life, but he wasn't most people anymore. Ash had reached full maturity. The dragon was magnificent. Silver scales that caught starlight and turned it into something between liquid and metal, wings that could carry them across entire solar systems, violet eyes that saw through dimensions most humans couldn't perceive. Their bond had deepened until Daniel sometimes forgot where he ended. And Ash began, he could sense. Dimensional currents naturally, now, could feel the presence of other Draka. From vast distances, his aging had slowed, his perception had expanded. He was becoming something between human and dragon, something new. More bonded pairs had formed, each free dragon sought its chosen human if that human still lived. The network grew, 43 bonded pairs now operated across the sectors, sharing information, coordinating operations, fighting the hollow circle wherever they found it. Daniel lived on his old freight ship now. The cabin on the forest moon was a memory. He couldn't return there, too exposed, too vulnerable, so he and Ash traveled constantly, never staying anywhere long enough for hunters to catch them. They were planning the largest operation yet. The Hollow Circle's main processing facility on an industrial moon. Harvested dragon essence was refined into drugs where the worst suffering happened. Dozens of trapped Drakai, hundreds of guards, defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets. That it should have been impossible, but Daniel had learned that impossible just meant difficult and dangerous, not undoable. The attack came from multiple angles. Bonded pairs struck simultaneously at 3 points, overwhelming defensive systems. Daniel infiltrated through maintenance shaft while Ash and the elder dragons drew fire from above, but it worked better than he had hoped and worse than he had feared. They freed 64 dragons, destroyed harvesting equipment worth billions of credits, dealt the Hollow Circle their most serious blow. Yet, but Daniel was caught in an explosion as he evacuated the last group of free Drakai. Shrapnel tore through his side. He collapsed in the burning facility with alarms screaming and guards converging. Ash appeared through smoke and fire. The dragon scooped Daniel up gently and flew through collapsing corridors. They emerged into open sky just as the facility's power core detonated below them. Hours later, they landed at a hidden base where other bonded pairs waited. Daniel's injuries were severe. Without proper treatment, he would die within days. Kurth examined him carefully. The elder dragon's ancient eyes showed concern. Through Ash, Kurth explained there was a way to save Daniel, but it would change him permanently. Fundamentally, the bond between human and dragon could be deepened, made complete. Daniel would gain access to the dimensional realm where Drakai truly existed. He would live for centuries if he chose. Slowly perceive reality in ways no normal human could, but he would never be fully human again, never fit completely in human society, never be able to return to ordinary life. KTH waited for Daniel's answer. Daniel looked at Ash. The dragon's violet eyes showed concern and love and absolute trust. Ash would support whatever choice Daniel made. Stay human, become something more. It didn't matter to the dragon. Their bond transcended physical form, but Daniel thought about the free dragons, about the bonded pairs fighting across the sectors, about the work still undone. The Hollow Circle still operated, still trapped Drakai, still harvested consciousness for profit. Someone needed to fight them. Someone needed to coordinate the resistance. Someone needed to bridge the gap between human institutions and Draka consciousness. Do it, Daniel said. The transformation hurt in ways pain couldn't describe. His consciousness expanded beyond his body. He felt himself existing in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, the physical Daniel, lying injured on a medical table. The dimensional Daniel spreading awareness across spaces that had no proper names, that he saw the universe as Drakai saw it, threads of consciousness connecting all living things, patterns underlying reality, the shimmer of souls moving through existence. It was beautiful and terrifying and overwhelming. Ash was there with him, guiding him, keeping him anchored. The dragon's presence prevented Daniel from losing himself. The vastness, slowly he learned to control his expanded awareness, to exist as both human and something more without going insane from the contradiction. When he woke, his injuries were healed. His body felt different, lighter, stronger, more connected to everything around him. Through his new perception, Daniel sensed Draki across the galaxy, hatchlings appearing to seek their bonded humans, free dragons moving through dimensional currents, trapped dragons still suffering in facilities he hadn't reached. Yet he also sensed the hollow circle mobilizing. They knew he was wounded. They were planning a massive operation to destroy the bonded pairs while they were vulnerable. Daniel stood and walked to his ship's observation window. Below, dozens of bonded pairs gathered, humans and dragons working together, a network of guardians defending consciousness itself against those who would exploit it. Allison Brooks had joined them. She bonded with a copper scale dragon named Toth. Several of Daniel's old freight pilot contacts had found their dragons. 2. The movement was growing. That a message came through on official channels. The evidence they had gathered from raided facilities was causing sector-wide investigations. Multiple governments were banning dragon essence trade. Hollow circle operations were collapsing under scrutiny. That it wasn't total victory. The syndicates still operated in lawless regions. They still trapped dragons where they could, but the tide had turned. Public opinion had shifted. Enough people care now to make a real difference. Daniel felt Ash's presence beside him. The dragon projected an image, dozens of hatchlings appearing across the galaxy, seeking their bonded humans, finding them, new pairs forming every day. It's just beginning, isn't it? Daniel said that. Ash's response came as pure feeling. Yes, beginning. The network of guardians would grow. The work would continue. Dragons and humans together, maintaining balance, fighting exploitation, protecting consciousness itself. Daniel had spent 3 years hiding from guilt and responsibility. He had believed his life was over after his crew died. He had been wrong. His life hadn't ended. It had been waiting for a silver dragon to appear at his cabin door, waiting for him to understand that failure wasn't permanent and guilt could transform into purpose. The freight ship's engines powered up. They had another mission, another facility to raid, more dragons to free. Ash spread wings wide, and Daniel felt their bond pulse with shared determination. They were ready. The hollow circle was still dangerous. The work was still difficult. People would try to kill them, but Daniel wasn't afraid anymore. He had found something worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary, a bond that transcended lifetimes, a purpose that mattered. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and behind them, other bonded pairs followed, an army of dragons and humans moving together toward the next battle. Daniel Reed had been a freight pilot, then a hermit, then a fugitive. Now he was something else entirely, a guardian, a bridge between species, a protector of consciousness, and it had all started because one small dragon chose him long ago and waited patiently for him to be ready. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled past in patterns that told stories only Draki could fully understand, but Daniel could perceive. Him now could read the meaning in their light. The universe was bigger than he had ever imagined, more beautiful, more dangerous, more worth defending. Ash made that purring, chirping sound Daniel had first heard in his cabin, the sound of contentment, of being home. Daniel reached out and touched the dragon's scales. He was home too, finally, after searching for 3 years without knowing what he was looking for. He had found it, not a place, not a person, but a purpose, a bond, a reason to keep fighting even when fighting seemed impossible. The dragon had known that all along, had chosen him for exactly that reason, for the courage to keep trying after failure, for the compassion to protect the vulnerable, for the stubborn human refusal to give up when giving up would be easier. Daniel smiled as they flew toward the next mission. Let the hollow circle come, let them bring their weapons and their hunters and their dimensional anchors, that he and Ash would be ready. They would always be ready, because some bonds couldn't be broken, some purposes were worth any cost, and some humans, when chosen by dragons, became exactly what the universe needed them to be: guardians, protectors, warriors of consciousness itself. The ship jumped again, and the stars sang their ancient songs. Daniel listened with senses no normal human possessed, and understood that his story was just one thread in something vast and ongoing, but it was his thread, his choice, his bond